very warm welcome to everyone today. Welcome to this session of our People Hub. As a lot of you will know, my name is Victoria Brown. I am the Managing Director of One HR and High Performance Consultancy. And we set up the People Hub now before the pandemic, the idea being that would be an opportunity to bring like-minded people together, so employers, HR professionals, anybody that is responsible for people within their business. And what we're trying to create is a real sense of community to be able to share best practice, to learn, to gain knowledge and understanding. And as you know, we do have different topics each month. This month, it is Stress Awareness Month, so we thought that it would be very fitting for us to have this focused on mental health. I'm delighted to have with me today Colin, who for those of you who attended last month will have met him. Colin Jones is our newly appointed health and safety expert within High Performance. So I will give him an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about that shortly. And we also do have an external speaker today. So it's great to have Jim with us today. Jim Grimmer is the founder of a company called P3. I'm going to give him the opportunity to talk a little bit later on around his business. It's P3 Business Care Personal. It is a social enterprise. So Jim and I have spent a lot of time in the last week talking about his business. It's amazing what they're doing. He's got a really good understanding of mental health and what they're doing for businesses across the UK. He's going to talk to you about and give you some practical guidance today. So I'm really looking forward to today. It's going to be a really interesting session. I'm going to hand over to Colin now. And what I would say is we really want you to ask as many questions as possible. I want you to get the most out of this session. I am going to ask that you do pop it in the chat rather than unmute yourself, just to help it be a bit more seamless. And we are also recording this for the benefit of people that can't attend today. So any questions, pop them in the chat. I will be keeping my eye on the chat box, and I will put that to the panel shortly. So I'm going to hand over to our expert, our health and safety guru. Some of our team call him Careful Colin these days. New nickname for you, Colin. So if you'd like to just share your expertise, please, Colin.
Thanks, Vic. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. As Vic says, I'm the health and safety consultant here at High Performance now. So I've started building up some client base now as we're taking the in-house health and safety. Obviously, with the Stress Awareness Month, this is a very interesting topic now. And I've been doing a bit of research, looking at the HSE and looking at IOSH, who I'm a member of as well. And they put together some interesting statistics. So I thought it'd be interesting to prepare some slides just to go through that and just talk through those. And if you look at them and read them, and if you got any questions as we go through, then by all means, put them down in the chat, as Vic has said. So if you just look, I hope you can all see that slide where it says mental health and stress statistics. This was sourced by the HSE, and as you can see, they're talking about something like 15.4 million days lost, and this is directly related to mental health and stress, work-related illnesses. So there's an estimated cost there of 5.2 billion, as you can see, and that's a very conservative estimate, because this is only the HSE's reported information. So there's a lot that goes on in workplaces, and as we talk about it a bit later on about the stigma and everything else that's around mental health, this is only what is reported. So clearly the impact on businesses is probably potentially a lot greater than this. And especially when you look at the last point there, where it says 51% of all work-related ill health is attributed to stress, depression, and anxiety. That's quite an alarming statistic in itself, I think, because it demonstrates just how, or the impact that it's having now on businesses more and more. And I think it's become very, very obvious the way the HSE and other bodies within health and safety now are viewing mental health as much as they are looking at the physical risks within businesses now. So it's something that everybody who, even those who would traditionally consider themselves relatively low risk in terms of health and safety, in terms of physical accidents or injuries and so on and so forth. With the onset of this mental health and stress statistics, I think it's affecting everybody, and I think it's something that we all, as businesses, we all have to take heed and recognise. More so now, I suppose, as businesses are now opening up with the return of the restrictions of COVID. We're already seeing, and I've already been speaking to clients who are already witnessing people who are coming back to work and saying, although they're keen to come back to work, it's met with a sense of anxiety, shall we say, in terms of what to expect, what's new, what's my role going to be, all of these type of things, which employees are now already coming forward and expressing certain concerns. If you can click to the next slide, please, Dan. So looking at HSE and what they're doing now is looking at a good standard practice in how you can manage stress and manage health and safety in terms of the stress and mental health. And they look at 6 key facts here. So you're looking at people's demands on their job. What is their workload? What kind of environment are they coming into? What are they working in? What work patterns are, what the requirements are, both immediately now coming back into COVID, but also moving forward as a business, what you're doing. Control, the next point there is actually thinking about how much say do people have in their role. Yeah, so is it all imposed on them? Do they have a say in what their role should be and how they should do their role? Again, another experience I had speaking to somebody. They had a manager who was very, very keen on micromanaging people. And he's had people who were working remotely and then coming back into the workplace. And people have struggled adjusting back to that micromanagement style simply because they've been working remotely, they've been working on their own devices, but now they're coming back into the workplace and expected to just pick up where they left off. So it does have that impact. So you've got to be careful about that control. Support looks at your culture, really, in terms of, do you encourage your staff? Are you supportive? Do you praise them? Do they have all the adequate resources in place? And, did they have everything that they need to be able to do the job comfortably and feel that they're valued? Again, relationships. Again, it's asking you to look at where potential conflict could it present itself. So you've got to think about measures you're going to put in place to avoid that conflict, and what you're going to do in terms of dealing with any unacceptable behaviour that you do witness. The role itself, do people actually fully understand their role? Is it something that has changed? Is there any sort of potential confusion? Is there any sort of crossover with other people doing jobs as well? So again, there's another factor that you need to take concern with. And then lastly, looks at change. How is change happening in your business? I think that adage of change is constant, but obviously plan comes in 2 forms. It comes in planned and it comes forced. And it's how you're managing that and the impact it's going to have on people who are working within your organization. So it's very key that you look at those 6 key factors, and then when you're looking at managing stress in your business, that you take focus on that. Okay, Dan. So again, when you're looking at risk assessments, as I said to before, in the past, certainly from a HSE point of view, what they've been looking at is risk assessments in terms of physical injury or physical risk to employees. But there's a definite shift, and especially when you see that statistic of 51% of ill health is attributed to stress, anxiety, and depression, that there is a need to risk assess those areas as well in terms of mental health and stress. So you've got to consider, how you're going to manage the workplace related stress, what control measures and what appropriate measures can you and have you put in place, or will you need to put in place in order to manage that. Looking at it from an organizational level, you need to consider who are the most vulnerable or who are the most exposed to the likelihood of work-related stress, and again, putting those measures in place to ensure that they're able to do the job as comfortably as possible. Managing root causes obviously speaks for itself, and the emphasis here is about the preventative messages, preventative methods, and that you're putting into place rather than having to deal with problems as they arise. So you can be a lot more proactive, if you like, in terms of putting the preventative measures in place. And the last thing is about recording. I think it's important that everything is recorded, and particularly if you've got 5 or more employees, you have an obligation under health and safety to risk assess, and it has to be documented and recorded anyway. So I think you need to make sure that that is done, and it's another safeguard, and it actually works if it's communicated with the staff so they can get a better understanding of what measures are in place, so they know and they can feel comfortable in terms of what's expected of them and how things are going to be managed in terms of managing the stress levels. Just lastly, on the last slide, it sort of talks about, this came from a survey. If you could flick over to this, Dan, please. This was a survey done by IOSH, a cross-section of a few hundred businesses across all industry sector. And it sort of highlights a little bit that as much as employers, we can put all these control methods in place, you've really got to consider what the culture's like. And I don't know whether, I'm sure Jim is going to touch on this in terms of having managers who feel they are capable and able to manage situations. We're not expecting managers and business owners to become social workers or become counselors in any way, but it's actually recognizing the signs and being able to create a culture or create an atmosphere whereby people are quite willing to come forward if they do have these issues and do have these problems. As I say, the alarming one there for me is the 80% of staff fear stigmatization and being seen as incapable of their role. And I think that is quite an alarming statistic, really, in terms of, regardless of how you feel, it's the individual and whether they feel comfortable and confident that coming forward isn't going to expose them and potentially put their work under threat. But the other one for me is the importance of line managers and business owners creating that, if you like, that top-down driven support to make sure that it's managed in the best way possible to ensure that people feel secure and people feel quite willing and open to come forward and to discuss these issues. Because, as I say, it is a major problem now, and I think before long you'll see mental health and work-related stress, absenteeism in the workplace is overtaking the physical side now. So I think it's something that we definitely need to take on board and really focus in on and hone in on this now. So that's pretty much as I've got to say, unless people have got any questions as they pop up. But that's, from a health and safety point of view and from a business point of view, you're looking at how you're managing it and what the impact is on individuals is something that you need to take on board and really work on, really. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks, Colin. That was really insightful. I think it certainly sets the scene for the sort of the position that we are in within mental health. And it's really interesting when you sort of describe the importance now of not just considering physical health. We need to consider mental health far more than we once did. So I'm going to bring Jim into the conversation now, and don't go anywhere, Colin, because I've got still quite a lot of questions for you. Firstly, thank you so much for joining us today. And I know I gave a little bit of an intro, but I can't do it as well as you. Can you just tell everyone a little bit about you, Jim, about your business?
Yeah, well, great to be with you this afternoon, folks. Thanks, Victoria, for the invitation, and great conversation to be having this Stress Awareness Month, as you said. I'm based in Aberdeen. My working background was actually 20 years as a police officer in the home city of Aberdeen and 20 years in the oil industry. Aberdeen at one point being referred to as the oil capital of Europe. So everything was very much focused around the oil industry. And I worked in various management roles within the oil industry. And really, in my time in the oil industry, I've already touched upon it. Things were very reactive. Things would get to a crisis point, etc., before something actually happens. So we'll go into it a little bit more depth in the model, etc. But that's why I created P3 Business Care, to bring personal, proactive care to employees working in partnership with the employer.
Amazing, brilliant. Well, we've obviously just talked around sort of mental health, and I think whilst we all have mental health, it has been at the forefront of certainly many employers that I talk to's minds. It's been all over the media. Colin's just said there, 51% of work-related ill health is attributed to stress, depression, or anxiety. Significant numbers there. I'm really keen to understand sort of what your experience has been, Jim, over the last year before this pandemic, and sort of what your general thoughts around the situation is within the country at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much statistics, flying about, but, I tend to look at, as Colin would, looking at IOSH, which is the Body for Health and Safety, etc. I was seeing a recent report from the Office of National Statistics, ONS, and now saying that it's about 1 in 5 people will be experiencing some form of depression during COVID. And in pre-COVID, that was about 1 in 10. So it just shows you the real impact that COVID is. As we know, a lot of us from a personal situation being really challenged, people being put into situations they've never experienced before, with home working, managing the challenges of working from home and maybe caring for family and homeschooling. There's been so many really challenging situations. And even for HR, Victoria, I mean, that's your career and massive experience, but I felt really sorry for HR in a lot of respects. And there's a people management report, people management being one of the HR lead magazines. They said there'd been a 70% increase in the number of stress-related absences in HR in 2020 compared to the previous year. And their average days of absence was sort of third in the table, only topped by the healthcare sector. And we know that the stress that the NHS have been under, obviously, but really interesting from an HR perspective. And in my experience, particularly for HR, have often been tasked with delivering the bad news, in effect, managing that whole redundancy process. But then at times, then becoming the victim of bad news themselves. So they've gone through the challenges of managing that whole redundancy process. And the company has then said, okay, thanks very much, but I'm sorry, you're next to go. So incredibly stressful. And I think, HR in a really challenging position, because if I'm being honest, my time in business, and this is not applicable to every HR person, obviously, but predominantly they can be seen as protecting the business rather than being there for the individual employee. And they're often party to, confidential information within the company. Maybe the CEO or MD will come to them and say, look, we're planning redundancies. This is what will happen over the next 6 months or so. And, then I'm thinking, who have they got to share this with? They're having to manage and deal with that themselves. So a really difficult position. And I really feel P3 Business Care, we often say we're there to support the CEO down to receptionist. But in particular for HR, I'd like to think we're someone that understands the pressures of, the situation they're in, the role that they're performing, and give them an out. It's interesting, I was having a conversation with a company at one time about potentially supporting them. And the HR manager said, oh, there's people as people come into my office with the office gossip kind of thing. And will I lose that, you know, if we take on business partners? And I said, no, you know, we're there for something completely different. If someone's of that mind that they'll come in and, you know, tell you what's going on within the office, I said, that's not going to stop. So yeah, as I say, I feel that it's been a massive opportunity. And as we transition out of COVID and we start getting employees back into the workplace, there's lots of employees will be coming back having gone through experiences that their employer is totally unaware of. In my experience in the first lockdown, companies were very proactive in communicating with employees, having that regular weekly calls, checking in their well-being, etc. But then the second lockdown happened, and certainly in conversations that I've had, that sort of tailed away. So over a period of time, as I say, employees have been dealing with situations employer will know nothing about. And the model of P3 is to be there twice a week, giving them the opportunity to speak about whatever is going on in life. I really created the P3 model because, as I said, when I seen my own experience in the oil industry, everything got to a crisis point before something kicked in to provide support. So I started looking at what I would call the traditional employee assistance program. And I had conversations with people that worked in companies with an EAP. And I says, look, give me your thoughts about your EAP. And often the first thing they would say is, oh, do we have one? You know, it was poorly publicised. They were unaware that it was there for them. Or secondly, they would say, there's no way I'm phoning a 0800 number to speak to someone I've never spoken to before about an issue going on in my life. And then thirdly, if I did, would it remain confidential? Or, you know, would it leak back to management in some way? Or lastly, they said, well, if I did use it, it would be a last resort, you know, and that would normally be when they're gone off absent and HR would plug them into the EAP. So I really wanted to turn that on its head. We've got male and female business partners that visit our client premises twice a week. And we're not sitting in an office waiting for someone to come to us. We're just in the office. We're circulating, popping into the offices, walking amongst the desks, etc. So it's not a big thing to be seen, to be having a conversation with a business partner. And that could be, you know, it could be about the result of the local football match on Saturday, or it could be someone saying, actually, this has happened, could you help? So I wanted to be very personal, to get back to this ability to have that face-to-face human interaction. I think that's how we're made at the end of the day. Lots of EAPs have even moved away from the 0800 number, so at least that was an opportunity to speak to a human being, and they've gone down the app kind of route. So they've taken that human interaction away, and I wanted to get back to just being there face-to-face, giving people an opportunity to share, and not just what's going on at work. The CIPD, the lead body for HR, have been very active in the last couple of years, really about promoting a holistic care for employees. So we all know personally, I'm sure everyone on the call has had something going on in life that is ultimately impacting them in the workplace. We don't miraculously leave that when we walk through the door of the office. So the care that we provide is to the employee and to immediate family. And by that, I mean the parent, partner, child relationship, because if we know there's anything going on in that sphere, that is impacting the employee in the workspace.
It's an interesting point that you make, Jim, and obviously from my own experience around EAPs, I think there is sometimes this is a bit of a tick box exercise, isn't it? And it's sort of like, right, okay, we'll purchase an EAP, we've ticked a box, anyone's got a problem, signpost them to that. And we've done as a company, a lot of studies around this when we've worked with clients to see what the usage of EAP is. And, you know, as you described there, it's always incredibly low. And it's that fear factor, I think, from many employees that the information is going to go back to the employer. And, you know, it absolutely doesn't. It's completely anonymous. All that the employer gets to find out is how much it's being used, but it's not, or it's not. I mean, the amount of companies that I've worked with and they have something in place, but it's never been publicised to their people, which again is a big challenge. But when we were talking on the phone, Jim, you know, I told you about that article I'd read around Timpson's, you know, the obviously fantastic, very good employer, and has got some great ideas, and one of which that he had, I think he had 3 directors. One was like their emotional director, and they did that exactly that, Jim, you know, having those conversations around all of the stores for Timpson's, because they could find that a lot of the poor performing shops, the high absences were all related back to some sort of mental health problems, and a lot of time they were, you know, financial, sort of non-related to work. But we haven't all got Timpson's money, have we? You know, and I think majority of people on this call now are obviously the clients, the SME businesses. So that's what's great today, I think, of understanding what other options are out there. So it'd be obviously there is the mental health first aiders as well, and that's something that we as a company would recommend to clients. So I'm just interested to understand what your opinion of mental health first aiders are, and maybe just share a little bit about what they are to maybe people in the room who don't know what they are.
Yeah, mental health first aid has exploded, really. I'll share, I saw an article posted in The Guardian, this is back in 2019, and they had a graph with the FTSE 100 companies, and there was over 10,000 staff had been trained in this top 10 FTSE 100 companies as mental health first aiders. And I sort of dared in social media, I dared to ask the question if mental health first aiders were being effective. And I got quite a kickback, as you might expect, from companies that did mental health first aid training. But I said, look, I think it's absolutely excellent. I would encourage any individual to go through that training, or business partners take part in the 2-day accredited mental health first aid training course. I think it is excellent. It raises awareness of the variety of mental health issues that you might come across in the workplace. Gives you some tools in having those conversations. I mean, one of them, people would often think, oh, should I ever ask anyone if they feel suicidal? And they think, no, I better not ask that in case they go and do something. But that training says, encourage you to actually have that conversation. So it is excellent training. But alongside that Guardian article was a report from a health and safety executive to say that there was no evidence to really show that it was effective, or certainly had any kind of long-term effectiveness in helping in mental health situations. And you mentioned tick box. Yeah, I think, you know, people are not stupid. I think they know, and it comes back, as Colin touched upon, culture in an organisation. I think employees know when something's been put in place, and it is the tick box. It's the thing that's there for a day and a dinner kind of thing, and then no one ever speaks about it again. You're right about engagement with the EAP. I mean, I was massively surprised to see a report from the EAP organisation themselves saying that there was only an average 5% take up of the EAP. But yeah, I think in some respects, I'll give you an example. You know, I was speaking to an organisation in Aberdeen, a legal firm, about 400 staff, and one of the quite senior guys, actually director level, had said, oh, we've trained 6 people as mental health first aiders. But one of them is a young girl who sits in a basement office and maybe sees 6 people in a day. So he was even agreeing that this, as far as the company was concerned, was that tick box exercise. And we've seen it in business over the years. you know, your investors in people, which is a great thing at the time, but that you never hear that spoken about now. Total quality management, that was another great thing that was promoted. And my concern is that a lot of companies are thinking, let's train people as mental health first aiders, and they think somehow miraculously that will solve all the problems. You still got, as good as it is, and it all comes down to relationship, doesn't it, at the end of the day? If your mental health first aider in a company is someone that you feel you can trust, then yes, you might go to them and open up. But you're still asking a colleague to speak to a colleague. And I think the strength of where we're coming from with our business partners is that we're independent. We're there in the business twice a week, developing that trust and relationship. We've been really lucky, I think, that we've had very quick engagement whenever we've supported a company. And someone has come to us and said, look, this situation, can you help? And we've been able to bring that to a successful conclusion very quickly. So that's filtered through the rest of the organisation. That has then increased engagement. You know, you can trust these guys, you know, they won't report back to management, etc. And everything that we do, every conversation that we have is confidential. As part of the induction, we clarify that we've got 28 categories of confidential discussions. That's both life and work related. And everything's confidential except in 3 circumstances. So that is if they're threatening injury to themselves or someone else. If they're threatening to do something that would materially damage the business in some way, or they have or are about to commit a crime. That's the 3 times when we say, look, that would not be confidential, but everything else is. And so, yeah, coming back to the mental health first aid, excellent training. But it then begs the question for me, who's actually taking care of the mental health first aiders? Because you're then putting another task on potentially already busy people, you know, and invariably the people that come forward for that training are they're people, you know, they want to help, and you'll find that they're normally very busy in their roles within a business. So in a lot of respects, that's putting another task upon them. Whereas we want to be there, coming back to the HR situation, and managers, you know, Colin spoke about managers as well. I think managers are so often spinning so many different plates. You know, they're trying to do their job, they're trying to run the business, they're trying to help people if they can. And often it's the people plate that's allowed to drop first in effect. So we there very much as in a support role to the business, and not to replace an EAP.
I think it's a good point that you make, Jim, around mental health first aiders. And one of the things that we always do is when our clients do approach us around mental health, we do suggest that they look at, you know, Mind, the charity. I mean, they've done some fantastic work, haven't they? And one thing that they offer is the pledge. You know, a lot of our clients have signed up to the pledge, and it's that bigger picture, isn't it, Jim? And I'll bring Colin into conversation in a minute, because he's talked about, you know, looking at the root cause, and you can't just sort of handpick some of this. It forms a bigger strategy. So I will share in the chat box later sort of that Mind and their link to the pledge, because I think all of this and the work that you do, Jim, first aiders, it all links back to this overarching sort of strategy and plan that you need to have in place about your people. Yeah. Just a practical tip. I think when you said there about, you know, it's only as good as the delivery and I suppose the exposure that first aid, that mental health first aider has. But we have a client who has really embraced looking at mental health. You know, we are supposed to signpost people, aren't we, to the support that they need, and recognise when somebody does need that support. And they had a fantastic way. They've trained up the first aiders, but then on their signature strip, they actually have it on the signature strip, which I thought was fantastic, you know, just to say, I am, you know, mental health first aider, and then what and how they can support, which was great. And I think that again forms part of that bigger piece. I just just wanted to bring Colin into the conversation now, because obviously, Colin, you've talked before to us all practically to say, and Jim as further confirmed that we can't put a plaster on this. It's deep rooted. It's a pandemic in itself. It's a challenge. I suppose when we do have, we have a lot of calls when people have somebody that's gone off with work-related stress. So that's the first call that we get. And so, there's probably a lot that could have been done before that person actually got to that point where they went off. Yeah. And my question to you is sort of around the risk assessment. So I know we do get a lot of questions from clients asking us, do we have to complete a risk assessment for stress-related issues? So I just wondered if you could provide some guidance on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the bottom line is yes, you should. It's, as I said, it's traditionally we would look at the physical aspects of risk assessment, but now more and more, and I mean this more for the lower risk type of businesses, like the office-based type of businesses, who probably do that little bit of risk assessment, but probably haven't considered risk assessing against stress and looking at the impact that that's having. So I always recommend it. It's all part of the management of health and safety, and rather than sort of looking at it as a separate issue, it's that integration within how you're managing the system in the first place and how you're managing that way. But excuse me, it's taken that, as I say, it's taken that organizational level in terms of looking at where the majority of vulnerability is really. I mean, I know it can affect everybody, but you need to look at where the root causes are. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for businesses coming back in who are reopening up, because the reality of it is they've still got to make money, they've still got to make their sales, they've still got to do all of those challenges that are there, and it might be just those added pressures that are being put onto individuals now, and unbeknownst to business owners or managers and things like that they're not actually picking up the signs, and they're not actually seeing what effect it's having. And as Jim pointed out, we can't ignore the fact that pressures from home and what's happened at home do have an impact in the workplace as well. And so as much as people like to come to work and try and get an escape from those pressures, if it's another layer of pressure which then manifests itself into stress, then we as managers and we as business owners need to make sure that we're putting all of those things in place, those practical control measures. And for me, most importantly, I think, is creating the right kind of culture which embodies that and gives that, that opportunity for people to come forward. But mostly, and going back to what you're saying about first aiders, it's actually their line managers who are more understanding and appreciative of the situation, and they are equipped with the tools to understand and not feel that, oh no, I can't, this is a subject I don't want to broach, because that to me is just, it's destructive really. So most definitely the HSC, and certainly with the research I've done with IOSH and other safety bodies, mental health and the mental health issue is probably going to overtake the issues of as I said, the physical aspect of health and safety. And I think mental health is and stress are going to overtake that very soon. So no business can ignore it. No business can just say, okay, well, we'll deal with it when it happens. You've got to start putting those preventative measures in now.
It's interesting. Simon Blake, he's the CEO of Mental Health First Aid in England, and he said that mental health first aid on its own is not enough. We need to ensure prevention and early intervention, just what Colin's saying. So there's a recognition even within that body. And as I've said, as excellent as the training is, but companies need to be looking at, how can we use this from a proactive perspective? And as I said, what was driving me in P3 actually to move into that preventative space, because we know in mental health, people will know that if someone goes off with mental health issues, it's never a quick fix. They're never back to work within a matter of days. That can often be protracted absence in the business, and a phased return, etc. Whereas, if we can nip this thing in the bud, so to speak. You know, someone feels comfortable to open up and say, look, I'm really struggling with X, and get them the support proactively that can keep them at work. And often I've spoken to people who have been signed off work with mental health issues, and ultimately they've said to me it's the worst thing that ever happened to them. You know, maybe a manager has said, oh, listen, just go to your doctor and get signed off. And then they're left sitting at home on their own for days or weeks on end. And it's been the worst thing for their mental health. So 100% with Colin there. We need to be looking at any kind of measures that we can take into our workplaces that are looking at prevention rather than this firefighting approach. You know, something happens, how we got to manage this? How can we put the flames out today? And, you know, someone goes off mental health in that long absence, then the manager's left with redistribution of workload, which then increases the work on his colleagues. Or maybe they have to get a temp, which, you know, is additional expenses. A whole raft of sensible reasons why we should be looking at this from a purely business and financial perspective, not just, you know, from the people aspect. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that you share, I totally agree with both of your comments there. And it's very interesting when, Colin, you described then the culture. That is such a key word at the moment, isn't it? It's looking at our culture, and I know I keep saying a tick box exercise, but we cannot do that at all. We've seen the figures. We know those figures are conservative. We know the impact. We all know the impact personally that the last 12 months has had on us all. You know, and we have a responsibility to our people, don't we, to ensure that we embed the right culture now and support people moving forwards.
Definitely.
I've just got a question from one of the attendees today, so I'm gonna shout it out, and whoever wants to answer would be great. So it's more of a point really, I suppose. It's from Logie, who said that the biggest issue are those disabled people who cannot go back to work and socialise. Also the fear of telling their employee that they have mental health issues, they might lose their employment. Mental health has increased during COVID, as we've discussed, and I'm not sure if there is enough help at the workplace. So, Colin, coming to you first.
Yeah, definitely, and I completely agree, and I endorse everything that Logie's saying there. It is so difficult, and I think what COVID did, and I think we talked about in the last webinar about businesses having that responsibility and not that responsibility for health and safety and well-being of their workforce extends. If they've been working from home, it extends to that as well. It doesn't diminish just because they're working from home. You still have to factor in that yes, they are working remotely, they are working in isolation. So what control measures are you putting in place, or what you should have put in place to ensure that is happening? And it was clear that, I think Jim mentioned it, in the first lockdown, it did kind of happen, but certainly in the second lockdown, it didn't. And it's quite alarming, really, when you see people certainly with physical disability, that if they're being forced to work at home, it is almost like they are imprisoned. And so you have to going back to what I was saying before about when you're risk assessing and when you're looking at which vulnerable groups are there, and if disability is one of those vulnerable groups, what additional control measures are you or should you be putting into place to make sure that you're catering, if you like, for their well-being? And you might have to do that little bit of extra measure just to make sure that it does happen.
Great point, Colin. Jim, anything else to add?
Yeah, and during COVID, obviously, our USP, I suppose, if you like, is the physical face-to-face visits at the workplace. And for some companies during COVID, they were seen as essential businesses, so they continue to operate. Our business partners continue to visit every week over the past year. But others were furloughed, etc. So we created my P3 app. And as I say, I'm not a great lover of apps, but we created my P3 app and rolled that out to our client companies. So when an employee downloaded the app, they would then be taken to a page with the profile photograph of their business partners and 4 icons that they could then call, text, email, or have a WhatsApp video call with their business partner. So that was helpful as a means of continuing to have that communication, giving them an easy way of still communicating with a business partner. But yeah, I think we've spoken this word culture so many times. I think it's got to come from the top. We're about to start a pilot in Sheffield, 60 million turnover business. The chairman wants P3 support. So it's right at the top, and he's driving it down through the organization. And yeah, I think there's been situations, give you an example. So an employee totally stressed in a financial role within the business, and speaks to their business partner and opens up. Now, before we can take that further, we have to get the permission of the employee. So this individual, said, look, we can have this conversation with the CEO. And then they said, yes, okay, do that. So walk into the CEO's office and say, look, this individual is completely stressed. It was actually year end, and they were trying to manage 3 other things in the business at the same time. So because the business partner comes from that business background, has the experience, said, my recommendation would be to take away A, B, and C and let them focus on what they need to do in year end. And CEO, put his hands up and says, oh, thank you. That's so helpful. Can you imagine if that individual had gone off absent right now at year end, etc. So a real practical way of being able to step into a situation and help with that, but yet bring it to the attention of, senior management within the company. And you like to think, if a company's engaged with P3, the culture is such that they see the value. The very first company we supported in Aberdeen were a highly regarded social enterprise themselves, had awards for how they cared for their staff, etc. But the CEO saw P3 as a means of taking the care for his employees to a different level. So, if a company's engaging with P3, we're pretty sure that they have got a culture of putting their people first, which is really important. It's not the tick box exercise because we're in there every week. Companies often run a seminar and they come and go, and as good as that may be, it's an hour and they're gone, whereas we're in there every week kind of thing. So
yeah, great point, Jim. We've got Michelle, the lovely Michelle, on the call today, who is a mental health first aider, and I happen to vouch for her. She's a very good mental health first aider within her company. She's asked the question, can she phone someone at home when they are off with a mental health issue? I think her concern is that it could be seen as the company harassing them. So Colin, go to you first. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it depends on the situation in terms of the length of time that they have been, because there's a period of time when you're going to have to, if you like, touch base with employees, especially if they're on long-term in employment, and I think it's a case of it has to be introduced. So to that individual, it is a case of, look, is it okay if I call you from time to time? That kind of approach, because at the end of the day, as a responsible employer, if you're trying to help that individual get back into a workplace, it's a fine line, really, isn't it? In terms of, are you harassing or are you being supportive? So I think how you communicate with the individual is important in terms of setting the scene, if you like, in terms of what the call is about, what its purpose is, and then taking it forward from there, really.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or guidance on this, Jim?
Yeah, I think it's about relationship again. Come back to that word. If you've got a relationship with that individual, or because the employee knows that we are there primarily to care for them. If ultimately we would hope we would have identified that situation before that it got to that point. But if not, and they are off. Yeah, we've had experiences with companies where we create what's called an extended care report. Just very briefly, you know, when I was creating P3, companies would say, oh, how can you prove the engagement? So our business partners complete a worksite visit report on their mobile phone, these 28 categories of the conversations we've had, and that's uploaded to a secure portal. No one's identified through it, but we can then produce a management report that shows the company we've had X number of conversations over this time frame across these different areas. And if we find a situation where as an individual we know will need protracted support, we create an extended care report. So that becomes an ongoing text-based report from a business partner perspective. So in the report, they'll see that there's maybe 3 open extended care reports and 1 closed. So they know that there's 3 individuals in the company, don't know who they are or what the topic is, but they're getting extended care. So if that situation happened, we would create an extended care report and would be assuming that the employee is happy, because, you know, we're not there to force ourselves on the employee in any way. This has got to be a voluntary thing from them to engage. And, you know, some people in the workplace, as it is in life, have got a strong peer group. You know, they're happy, they've got support, everything they need. So wouldn't necessarily engage with their business partner. Whereas others are very open to engagement. So anyone in that position of being off with mental health would certainly be given or look to be given extended care.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to add in from my perspective, Michelle, I think there's absolutely no harm in reaching out to somebody that's off. You know, I think it demonstrates, when we come back to the culture of the business, and let's face it, they can say no if they don't want to speak to you. I do have another question here from the amazing Karim. It's great to see you on the call again today, and I'm delighted that you've formed part of the PeopleHUB community. So he's asked the question around pregnant women. I know this has been publicised quite a lot at the moment, that obviously women have really suffered when they've had you know, babies during the pandemic, haven't had the same support. And he's asking it from a health and safety point of view within the workplace. So for those of you that know Karim, he has advised businesses to have a couple of ergonomic chairs for pregnant women to ensure they work more comfortably. And he was just asking what's your take on what we should be doing as employers for pregnant women, because surely this, you know, there will be an impact during this time. So again, Colin, what would your advice be to people who have got, you know, pregnant women within the workplace who most probably are working from home, aren't they still?
Yeah. Again, I go back to what I said earlier about just the fact that they are working from home. Employers still have a duty and still have a responsibility to carry out a risk assessment, and particularly people who are pregnant or have had a baby in the last 12 months. There still has to be control measures put in place to ensure that they're risk assessed as a separate entity, if you like, in terms of limiting what they can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do. Yes, it makes it more difficult when they're working from home, but, you know, ultimately you have to ensure that you've communicated and you've carried out that risk assessment from a health and safety point of view. Interestingly enough, just as an aside, my own daughter, she had a baby 2 days into lockdown, and she continues to work.
You're not old enough, Colin. You waiting for me to say
that? she had a baby, and she's working permanently from home now, but luckily she's in an organisation that have allowed her to work flexible as long as she gets her hours in. It doesn't matter whether that's into the evening or first thing in the morning or in the afternoon, to allow for her for childminding and childcare and all the rest of it. So, you know, that she's fortunate in that way that she's got that. But nevertheless, they did come out. They actually visited her at her home. when they could, and said, look, is there any additional support that you need? Is there anything else you need from equipment point of view to help you work, and as Kareem said, give her a special chair and stuff like that. But, obviously the bottom line is, and I always say this every time to businesses, you can only do what is within your resource in terms of what is practicable for you, and I think a lot of businesses just sort of like put their hands up and say, oh, we can't do this, we can't afford this. And it's not about affordability, it's about what is practicable and what you can do within reason to ensure the safety, the health and safety of everybody in work. And pregnant women, yes, have to have additional risk assessments, but again, it comes down to what is practicable for you to be able to ensure their safety.
Yeah. Great point, Colin. Thank you. I'm conscious of time now, so thank you so much to Colin and Jim today. I found this session really interesting, and I think, as I suspected, an hour just doesn't feel quite enough for this. So if there are sort of, we will obviously probably put on a very similar session again, because I think we as people managers, employers, whatever role you have within your business, you're here today because you care about your people. And we've been through a survival mode, I think, in the last 12 months, where we've had to do what is necessary to ensure that our businesses survive. And now there's a lot of fallout from that, one being mental health. And I think our next session will probably be around how we pick up the pieces and we look at your engagement and how to really get your business back thriving through your people. So a couple of things from me now. You've got obviously on the screen the details. You've got the details of Jim. If you're interested in what he's talked about and you'd like a bit more advice or find out a little bit more about how P3 Business Care can help you, then there is details. We will share them again. Obviously, if this is a community, it's complementary. We really want to be able to come together, share best practice, which I know we have today. And if we all learn from this and work together, then we'll come out of this pandemic stronger than ever. So if you did find it interesting, please do share with other people. They're more than welcome to join our community and be involved in future sessions. And let us know if there's anything that you'd like us to talk about in the next session. We have also got obviously Colin on our call today. Colin is doing at the moment some free complimentary health checks. So I know the first thing he did was he did one on HPC and one HR. So I'm not going to tell you what was in that, but there was some gaps. So he's plugged them gaps for us. So if you are interested in just spending an hour with Colin and he can just go through things for you, give you a bit of peace of mind, then the details are there now. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. We are recording a session, so if you do want to share or look back through, you can. And I will share the details of the pledge, as I've mentioned on the chat before as well. So thanks again, and I'll see you all very soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.